The first injury that we're going to be talking about is a disc bulge slash herniation. So first of all, what is a disc bulge or a disc herniation? Well, some basic anatomy. You've got a disc. If you look down on it from a bird's eye view, you've got a gel-like fluid in the middle, and then you've got these rings around the outside. So the gel-like fluid in the middle is known as the nucleus pulpus, and you've got the annulus fibrosus, which is the rings that sit around the outside. So a bulge is where the nucleus pulpus migrates its way through the annulus fibrous, and it gets to the last few layers, and it just bulges those last few layers out. A herniation is ever so similar. It just breaks through those final layers, and the nucleus pulpus comes out of the disc. What's causing that? In a very general sense, it's spine flexion added with compression. So you are essentially, if you've got the top of the spine here and the bottom of the spine here, you're compressing it together. So you're squashing it from top to bottom, and then you are bending it into flexion. Now, there are some caveats that come with that, and how long it will take the disc to injure. But these aren't injuries that happen in one moment. So if you have suffered with a disc bulge or a disc herniation, it wasn't that one moment where you picked up the pen or where you went to lift a box from the floor. It was weeks, months, possibly even years that built up to that. But there are some caveats that extend the life of the spine, if you will. And that is the shape of the disc. So the shape of the disc will determine how quickly it can injure or it can damage. You also have the health of the spine as a general rule. So if you have muscles that are stronger or that have more endurance or that are stabilizing the spine better, obviously that will take longer for it to injure. And if you have a more deconditioned spine, i.e. the muscles around it aren't as strong, don't have as much endurance, and aren't stabilizing the spine as well, that kind of spine will injure more quickly. If you add in a certain disc shape on top of that, then again that will injure it more quickly. The other thing that goes with that will depend on the behavior of that spine or the person that has that spine and loads that they are using, if you will. So heavier loads will increase the speed, but lighter loads will sort of not happen as quickly. So the injury won't happen as quickly. What we then have is you putting those together. So if you've got a spine or a disc that doesn't herniate or isn't predisposed to herniate because of the shape, if that spine is then strong, has good endurance, or if those muscles around it are strong, have good endurance and stabilize the spine, that can manage heavier loads. So the heavier loads won't injure as quickly as if you are lifting heavy loads with a disc shape that is more prone to herniate and muscles that aren't as conditioned to stabilizing the spine, don't have as much endurance and aren't as strong. So you can see it is a melting pot, and there are ingredients that predispose it in a certain way and predispose it in another way. So that's essentially how it occurs: spine compression and flexion, and then you repeat that cycle, and it basically just wears down the tissues, the bone, the disc, the muscles. It wears that down, and then we get the disc herniation and the disc bulge. Hopefully that makes sense, because it is a bit of a there are different instances when it will happen and it won't happen, or it'll take longer, or it'll be shorter. That's kind of the point that I'm trying to get across. So there is no definite to say that your spine is going to injure after doing 6 sit-ups or a workout of 6 sit-ups if you have a certain type of spine. That's what I'm trying to get across, because there are a lot of people out there that say that certain exercises or movements or postures or positions are absolutely fine and we should be doing them. Yes, we should, But again, it depends on the spine that is doing them and the way that it's doing them and how it's doing them and how often it's doing them. So that kind of ends what's causing it, because there is a behavioural element to it. How do we then go about rehabbing it? So how do we, or what exercises do we use? And how do we go about making our spine more resilient or robust against disc injuries? Well, first of all, we have to understand the mechanism that caused it, and that is compression and flexion. So we need to think about when we are compressing it and when we are flexing it individually, and when we are doing them together as well. Now, you're never really going to go throughout life and never do that. So we have to minimize it as much as we can. So we have to think about sitting, because that's when we flex our spine. That's at the desk chair, that's in the car seat, that's on the sofa. It could be exercises, so we have to think about exercise technique, the position of the spine, the load that we're using. So these are all the postures, the positions, the movements and the loads that we need to be thinking about when we're doing that. So first of all, we need to understand that mechanism that caused it. We need to then start reducing that mechanism. That's then going to start desensitizing the pain. It's going to start allowing the muscles to heal, the tissues to heal. And it's going to then allow all the muscles to recover as well. And then we can then start rebuilding the spine. So we need to basically rebuild three things. The three things that I talked about: the strength, the endurance, and the stability. They're the three things that we need to rebuild. Now, if we're talking about a mechanism which involves compression and flexion, it's probably a good idea not to use exercises that use compression and flexion. What I should also say is rotation is another cause of it, because that fatigues or delaminates the disc and allows it to migrate as well. So there's a rotational aspect to it. So we need to start thinking about, certainly in the early stages, of how we select our exercises. So we need to start selecting exercises that maintain the posture of the lumbar spine. Now, throughout everyday life, you are going to move your spine. That's going to happen. But again, as I mentioned, we need to minimize it. We need to build that core endurance. We need to build the core strength, and we need to build the core stability. So we would probably use exercises like planks, side planks, bridges, and bird dogs. The ones that I always use as my first port of call. Again, I need to go through a full assessment of the individual to be able to choose those specifically. But as a general rule, those will be the first exercises. They are the safest ones that I've found, that I've used with people, as long as the load is done correctly, the duration of the exercise is done correctly. There are those caveats that come with it, but essentially it's a plank, it's a side plank, it's a bird dog, and it's a bridge. So we choose those exercises and we start building endurance into it, which is the length at which, or the duration at which, we can perform those exercises. The strength is being the ability to get into the position that we want to be in. Then we add the endurance in, which is then hold that position for a long period of time. And then we would go about building the stability of it, which is the muscle timing. So if you can imagine walking, for example, when you're lifting up your legs, your muscles are going contract, relax, and contract on the other side. So they're constantly contracting on one side and relaxing on the other side as we walk. Now, if that is slightly mistimed by a split of a second, then there's going to be an instability within that, and that's going to help create pain. So we need to be able to stabilize. So using an exercise like a half kneeling as an example. So just going down onto one knee and focusing on balance, because your knee is going to wobble, your torso is going to wobble, your hips are going to wobble. So we would have a wide stance. So we go down onto one knee. We then have a relatively wide stance. So the back knee is over here and the front foot is over here. And then over time, we come onto more of a tightrope. That's obviously going to challenge the balance that much more. And then that's going to keep us in a much better or stable posture, which is going to get the muscles to time more effectively. So, as a summary, to finish this little section, what is a disc bulge or herniation? It's where the nucleus pulvis either bulges the annulus fibrosus last few layers or herniates through it. What's causing it? Spine compression and flexion, and there is an element of rotation of the spine as well. How do we then go about rehabilitating it? First of all, we need to know the mechanism. Then we need to rebuild endurance, strength, and stability to go with that.